Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir Lazouzi from easymedicaldevice.com. And today we will talk about other things than the EU MDR, other than Europe or FDA. We'll go to the Asian countries. So we will try to help you understand how you can register your products in Southeast Asia. And for that, I have with me Michael Wetherington. So Michael is the founder of medicalregs.com, and he was one of the guests of a previous episode about medical device testing. So Michael, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Thank you, Munir, for having me again. It's always exciting to be able to be part of your podcast. I'm Michael Wetherington. As Munir stated, I am the founder of medicalregs.com, and I was involved with Munir in the past podcast talking about medical devices testing and how to choose a test lab. Now we're going to be doing 180 degrees and talk about ASEAN regulatory requirements. So if that's in your radar right now, which is a multi-billion-dollar market, this will probably help you in a lot of ways. Yeah. So I'm going to let you go ahead, Munir, and let's try to share some information.
Yeah, I think this can be also an important thing for a lot of companies that want to reach some new markets and to understand then how difficult it is or how easy it is to reach those markets, and these new regulations in terms of Southeast Asia can help maybe to reach those markets easily, and we'll try to explain to you. So Michael, maybe first thing is what means, I had a lot of confusion before when we talked about Asian countries, and here it's ASEAN Medical Device Directive. So it's not all Asia, it's really specific. So what means ASEAN specifically?
Yeah, I'll clarify that. I guess it's how you say it, and how, if you see it spelled, I guess you can. So it's not Asia, ASIA, it's ASEAN, the way I say it, and it stands for Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So that's what ASEAN stands for. So, and it's a group of countries that have agreed to with the ASEAN Medical Device Directive. So that's what they follow in terms of how they define medical devices, how they classify it, requirements for post-market surveillance, as well as quality management systems. So they all agreed on that, but it does differ beyond that from country to country in different areas. So that hopefully we'll get to touch on some of those things, Munir. The variations from country to country, even though they all agree with the ASEAN Medical Device Directive, but when you get down to their local governments, it's like night and day. It depends on what country we're talking about.
And as you've said, so there is a certain group of countries. So can you give us some examples? Which country are we talking about here?
Yeah, some that are probably that I can mention is Malaysia is one, the Philippines, Vietnam, Laos, PDR, as well as Cambodia. So all those countries, Indonesia as well. I can't remember everything on the top of my head, but yeah. So those are the ones that if they are in your target market, those countries will be included in that ASEAN members.
So it's as you mentioned, it's a group of countries that agreed on a certain regulation. Can we compare it to Europe or not? Because in Europe, it's the same. All the countries are following, if I can say, the same regulation, but I don't know.
That's a very good question. We can do a contrast between comparison within the EU directive, let's say. So the EU directive, as we already know, that the member states follow the same directive or regulation now, MDR, right?
Yeah.
Well, in the same sense that the ASEAN countries follow the same regulations. But there are differences between the EU MDR, obviously, and the ASEAN Medical Device Directive. And I don't think we have time to get into the details what the differences are. But the primary content of any medical device regulation, you have to have some quality management system, right? So you have to have that 1345. 2016 is well recognized in this region, Southeast Asia region. So if you have that already from other major markets like the EU, then in most instances that could be transferred or be accepted by that local government within the ASEAN countries or members. So yeah, so you have post-market surveillance, you have all those core elements of a medical device regulation or directive that's also common within the ASEAN member states.
But I think the main difference, because as we discussed about it, one of the main difference I've seen is the fact that if I register my products in France, for example, I can sell it in Germany, UK until January 1st, Spain, etc., all the member of European Union. But it looks like it's not the same in this Asian with this ASEAN regulation. It's more like they are following the same rules. But at the end, if I'm registering in Indonesia, I cannot sell my products in Cambodia without a new registration. It's like each country is independent.
Understood. And one of the major differences is that for the EU, you have the CE mark, correct? So you have this single mark that that is a testament that you have met all of the applicable requirements of the MDR when that comes into effect. Whereas in the ASEAN, there is no single mark similar to the CE mark that is acceptable throughout the region, Southeast Asia. So you have to go through each of the countries. You have to identify your local economic operators for each of the country that you want to market your devices within the Southeast Asian member states. So that is one primary difference.
It means that you can come with the same documentation, the same requirements, but you have to go to each country one by one to submit your dossier. Is it correct?
That is exactly correct. And let me go back to the ASEAN Medical Device Directive. I mentioned that is the directive that all ASEAN member states agreed on in terms of medical device classification, formatting of the technical file, which is referred to as the CSDT. That is the format that is used to submit your medical device technical file to each of the governments within the ASEAN medical markets. So yeah, that's where the commonality ends. And as I mentioned, that the economic operators will have to be chosen for each of the country within that region. So you're going to have You're going to have importer, authorized representative, distributor for the Philippines, for Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia, etc. So yeah.
So in terms of the regulation, so as we said, the text is the same for all those regions. If I want to go and register my products in Indonesia, for example, I will have to read, if I can say, this ASEAN regular directive. So just to see exactly what is mentioned inside. I have to build a dossier, everything, etc. So the same thing as what we are doing in Europe. So right. How long do you have some experience about the timing? So when I'm starting to register in one country, approximately how long it can take so that I can go through all the process?
Right. Well, the submission to the regulatory authority for each of the country is pretty straightforward, depending on where you're at, because there are a lot of variables that may impact the length of time. So, for example, depending on what country, you have zoning requirements, you have language barriers, you got corruption that you have to deal with also that could contribute to the amount of time that it may take for a MedTech to get a final approval or clearance from that authority. But I would say from what I've seen is 6 to 12 months as an average. If your documentation is perfect, looks good, you've covered all of the essential performance or requirements within the ASEAN Medical Device Directive, then it's just a matter of going through the process internally. But if there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of questions, you have a lot of gaps, you lack information and clarity on your submission, then of course that's a given. It will take it longer than normal. So 6 to 12 months is a good time frame to get based on a simplified submission. What that means is you have pre-market clearance or approval from the US or a CE mark in the EU. So any major markets that each of the countries in the ASEAN recognize, it will certainly help you if you already have those. But if you can start from scratch, so if you're starting from scratch, it will take a little bit longer than 12 months, possibly. It depends, of course, as we know, it depends on the complexity of the device, you know. Yeah.
So it means that yeah, if I'm coming with a CE marked product, it can take less time because there is a lot of authorities that already reviewed these products, and maybe this would be a formality, I suppose. I mean, CE marking or FDA clearance for the product. So is it really like still 6 months, or we can reduce to 3 months, or this kind of thing, or it's like they are really making some deep dive investigation on this type of dossier?
I don't know if I got all of your entire question correctly, but what I think you were asking me, because you were, I think it's a signal that's cutting on and off. But I think I got what you were asking. If you have a CE mark as an example,
yeah,
from the EU, is that automatically recognized within one of the governments? So let's take Malaysia as an example, because we cannot just surmise them all as one country, because there's some variations still. But the countries that you are targeting will have a list of major markets that they will accept pre-market approvals, clearance, or certification. And typically those countries are Japan, Korea, South Korea, United States, and the European Union. So those are your major markets that they will take the pre-approval certification or clearance that you have, and they will consider those as part of your regulatory submission for their government or their country. Okay. So, there are some, I want to caution, because in Malaysia, as an example, if you have a CE mark through a notified body, such as BSI, as an example, or any equivalent notified body under the MDD or MDR, you have to be careful that the CAB that needs to evaluate your CSDT or technical dossier or file is not the same as the one that CE marked your product, because they do have, for example, BSI as a location in Malaysia. So in terms of conflict of interest, you don't want to choose the same notified body to assess your CSDT in Malaysia, who happens to be the notified body that provided the EC certification under the CE mark for your device. So that's a conflict. You have to probably choose another one for a CAB in Malaysia, because the CAB will have to evaluate your CSDT and give you a certificate before you can submit to the local authority or the medical device authority, which is the one in Malaysia. So I just wanted to put that as a note that I think if you happen to love BSI or any other notified body, there's sometimes you have to part ways depending on the market that you're trying to target, right? So in terms of conflict of interest. So basically, you can do that. In fact, I think most of the customers we've had are using pre-market approvals from clearance from FDA and CE marking, and we just do a simplified submission. We create the technical file based on their technical information that they have submitted to the notified body in EU or FDA. So we extract information from that, format it to the right formatting requirements. We follow, most countries in the ASEAN will have a guidance document how to populate your CSDT and so forth. Yeah, but there are steps that you have to go through.
Okay, so I think it's clear now. So if you can go from scratch, as you mentioned, so it can take 6 to 12 months, and you can go from already a CE mark product or FDA clear, and then it can take less time, or if it's recognized, can be immediate. So it's something interesting. I wanted to come back to one point that you mentioned. You said that then for each region or for each country, you have to have economic operators. So like in Europe, so an authorized representative or an importer or a distributor if you are already in the country. So is it the same principle? So you have to have an authorized representative that is representing you in the country in case of an issue of the product, an importer that will receive the products and then distribute that in all the countries. So is it the same kind of principle that we have in Europe?
Well, Well, in the EU, right, you can have one authorized representative importer if you choose, right? I
Yeah.
mean, distributor you can have many, but authorized representatives, so long as they're located in one of the member states, that's fine.
Yeah.
In contrast to that, you have to have different ones for each of the countries within the ASEAN, and they also differ. The authorized representative importer distributor in Malaysia may be different than that in the Philippines because each economic operators are governed by their respective governments. So they have rules, requirements for each of the economic operators. They're typically listed in the agency's database that they have been approved as a distributor, as an importer, as an authorized representative. So they have to meet licensing requirements locally for each respective countries. They have to have some form of quality management system also, even though they're an importer or distributor, they have to have that in place as well based on local requirements for that. So those are our key differences. So one, each economic operators for each country are different. They are licensed differently. They are licensed by the respective government and respective requirements. So it's not one for all. And they're all typically listed in the database when one can go and search for each of the economic operators, or there are some economic operators that can function as all three, as an authorized rep, importer, and distributor. It all depends on what your requirements are.
Okay.
There are both advantages and disadvantages of having one entity to deal with that can function all three all three economic operators. But there are some who chooses individual because some of the economic operators, for example, especially the importers or distributors, they're also selective. They don't automatically work with any MedTech device. If they have a special line of product that they only import or distribute, such as a gamma camera or an X-ray or MRI, they're not going to bother with a handheld, medical device or a portable home use device. So they have a specific line of products that they want. Some of them are firm about their pricing, import, monthly services to function as your importer, to function as your authorized representative. But certainly there's room for negotiation. If you have the patience to really negotiate with them, what you will find is that they will eventually work with you. They'll find a middle point. But most of them will have a pre-made templates there. Here's what we provide to everybody else. And then it's up to you if you want to question it or you want to make some changes to it. But you do have to take that time if you want to go that route to make some changes in the agreements between you and the economic operators. So, yeah.
I can imagine that it can be also struggling for a company to go to each country and to try to find or to negotiate with an importer or authorized representative. So, as you mentioned, is there some companies that kind of represent, have an office in all the Asian countries, all the Asian regulatory countries, where we say, okay, I with you, and then you manage the whole region instead of me negotiating with one in Indonesia, one in Malaysia, one in Thailand, etc., etc.
Right.
Is there some companies doing that?
There are companies that perform those kind of services. And medicalregs.com, we almost have presence in all of those Southeast Asian countries. We're still trying to fill them, but the idea is because you really need people on the ground. Sometimes you have to knock on doors to get things moving. So it's not something that you can do remotely. In most instances, you really have to be on the ground and go to the people that you're communicating with and really to make things happen. And what you'll find is that even if you try to do this remotely and be able to access all of the list of importers, distributors, and authorized representative for a given country, you'll be overwhelmed by how many there are. Okay. So what you'll end up doing is this: you have to narrow that down. You have to narrow down the list to maybe 2 or 3 out of 1,000. Let's say you have to narrow down 2 to 3 that you start communication with. How do you narrow that down? So you have to do a lot of investigative work. What requirements have they met? What are their company size, their financial status, what sort of medical devices? So there's a lot of email, phone calls that you will do for each and every one of them in order for you to narrow down the list so that that you can engage in a negotiation agreement with them. So that's a lot of time that you'll spend. But if you work with people who's already been through that experience, we've done the narrowing down of the list. We know who's good, who's not good. We know who's responsive. We know who has a good pricing, who's flexible with things. Then it might be it is an advantage for you just to go to that entity or person who's already gone through the motion of that, rather than you expending all those hours and time just trying to hopefully that you might find one that matches your needs or not. So it's best that you seek someone who's gone through the motion of things and finding the matches for the economic operators and knowing how to negotiate the contract, be the sort of the middle guy that negotiates between the two, the MedTech company as well as the economic operators.
So it's good. So are you also taking care of finding some importers and all those things, or just representing the companies in the countries?
I'm sorry, you have to repeat that, Munir, because you were cutting off a little bit.
Yeah, are you also taking care of selecting the importers for each country, or helping to select that, or you are just doing the authorized representative for each country?
Actually, the primary function that we do in terms of the Southeast Asian countries is that we help MedTech companies locate the best match for their economic operators for each of the country that they are wanting to market into. So that's one of the services that we do. We can help them narrow down the list rather than having yourself do it. It expend all that time and don't even know what you need to find, how to qualify the economic operators to narrow it down to one or two that you can negotiate a contract with.
Okay.
We can step in because we have gone through that motion and we know who's not going to work with you based on your device type and so forth. So yeah,
so it's a relationship. So it's a relationship really that you will be building with the manufacturer to really help them from A to Z to register in the countries and to represent them, to find the right partners, and to then be also the right intermediary, if I can say, between the manufacturer and all those partners in the region.
That is correct, Munir. It's a complete system. Regulatory is just one aspect of it. You can't really have a regulatory approval unless you've established these economic operators. And since you have a long-term relationship with these economic operators, you want to ensure that from the very beginning you have a good match, that you are in agreement with the things that you're going to be working together with in the next 3 to 5 years and so forth. There are costs involved, of course, so you want to make sure you identify the right ones that matches your needs and objectives for your medical device. So yeah. And let me also, there's also, as you are familiar, there's EMC, there's FCC in the United States, where here they take Malaysia, for example, an equivalent regulatory agency to that of the FCC in the US is MCMC.
Okay.
Okay. So just because you have met the requirements for FCC in the United States or EMC directive or 6601-1-2 doesn't automatically mean that, hey, it's automatically acceptable, because you have to understand that each country may have their own regulatory requirements in terms of intentional radiators. So if you have Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, they may operate at different frequency or certain bandwidths that they have assigned for certain sectors of the industry to be used. Or if it's acceptable for them, they require additional documentation on the Bluetooth component, test report on that, make sure that it's not expired yet. So those are the specific details that most people are probably not aware of, that the test reports will have time limits on them, expiry dates, that some government within the ASEAN region will not accept if it's about to expire. So on a Bluetooth test report or Wi-Fi, you got to make sure that you got to have the requirement of 5 years in some cases of life in that report before it expires. Otherwise, you have to request from the Bluetooth manufacturer an updated report that shows the expiry date to that would have a 5-year life on that report, as an example. I'm not saying that's universal, but that's one of the things you'll come across with if you're not completely aware of all the regulatory requirements outside of, the medical device. You have, product safety, EMC as well, just like most countries do, right? In the West, well, those things you have to pay attention on as well. Just because a standard may be harmonized, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's automatically acceptable. You have to make sure that if there's national deviations for those standards, that you consider those from the very beginning. So if you know you're going to be marketing your device in the Southeast Asian region, you must consider those deviations in those countries that, in Asia, so that when you submit it for testing, they consider it up front. You're not, you don't have any gaps or holes in your test report. Oh, you didn't consider a voltage. You didn't consider a frequency. You didn't consider some of the markings that we require in Malaysia, et cetera, as an example. And certainly lab accreditation. A lab accredited as a notified body in the EU or an NRTL lab accredited in the United States is not the same accreditation as the one, for example, in Indonesia. Indonesia, as an example, will have their own accreditation requirements for a test lab. Some major test lab may already have that, but not all may have the accreditation that the Indonesian government may have or require.
No, I think it's clear, and yeah, we can understand that even if there is one directive, so for this region, there are still differences that are existing within each country. So it's something that people have to understand, have to know, or get support from you, for example, to do that. So to be able to also notice that before you start to go to a country and then find that you have to redo a lot of tests, which can make you lose a lot of time or a lot of money also. So I think it's really an important thing that you select the right partner for this type of registration. And I think Michael Wetherington from medicalregs.com can really help you for that. Okay, so I think we covered all what we wanted to talk about today. So thank you really, Michael. Thanks also for people that are listening to the podcast. So thank you for all the messages. Just for information, so I was nominated for the Top Pro Awards for this podcast. So thank you for Top Pro for the nomination in the category communication. So in November 19th, I think, if I remember well, there will be the ceremony, so to see if I won or not. So I'm in competition with two other people.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, so I will see if there is a possibility to get this award, because the objective is really that we can spread the word and say that with the podcast we can really educate a lot of people, and if it can work for you, so it will be really great. So really thank you for all the support and motivation. Okay, so Michael, so really thank you for that.
I just want to add something real quick. I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me know.
Before I forget, I know that the podcasts are time limited and there's so much in the ASEAN regulations. I wanted to share it with you and to your audience that I am highly visible and almost spending a lot of time on LinkedIn. So if any of your viewers may want more specific answers regarding the ASEAN regulatory world, I'll be more than happy to answer those questions, because there's only so much we can share here. It's actually so much more details to what I've shared with you. But at least as a general overview, your audience will get some idea of the things they can start preparing on their own. But I think there's a lot more to be said about it. So all questions are welcome.
No problem. So I will put anyway your LinkedIn profile on the show notes. So please go to the show notes. I will put the LinkedIn profile. I will put also the ASEAN regulatory, the ASEAN directive, so directly there. So with the link, also a link maybe for the countries that are applying to that, so that you can have everything. But if you have any question, don't hesitate to go to Michael Wetherington on LinkedIn. You will see the profile and also the website of medicalregs.com on the show notes. So don't hesitate to do that. Okay, so really thank you, Michael. Really thank you for your help, and thank you for all the information. And I wish you a nice day.
You're always welcome, Monir, and thank you for having me again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.